All right, you can sew. You can sew. All you need is some thread and a needle. Whenever you're gonna sew, don't get a dinky little piece of thread. Get a long piece of thread, at least as long as your arm and probably a little bit longer. That will let you begin to sew and get some work done before you have to change out and get a new thread. So hold it to your arm and make sure it's longer than what you think. So the main thing you gotta do is thread the eye of your needle, which means you take your time, stabilize your hands on the table, and stick the needle through. You pull it through long enough so that there's a little tail. And yes, threading a needle can be frustrating. My thread just fell right out, which means I'm gonna take my time, make sure my whole thread's on top of the table, and do it again. Fortunately, the needles that we have here in my classroom have a really large eye, so it's kind of easy. And I'm gonna pull through. Did you see I left a long tail there? Other side. This is how we're gonna make a big mama knot. Wrap it around your finger a bunch of times, like 3 or 4 times. And then roll it off of your finger using your thumb so that it creates a big old tangly mess. Then pull down from the plain thread to make your knot. If it doesn't work, try it again. You can stop the video now and try that technique. I'll do it one more time. I'm wrapping the end of the thread several times around the tip of my finger, kind of loose, but not too loose. And then I'm gonna roll it off, roll, roll, roll. So all those pieces of thread wind around each other and create a mess. And then grab from up above and pull back to make a big knot that will never come out of my fabric. All right, so when you're ready to sew, you're gonna hold the needle down at the bottom. Your hand has the job of keeping the thread inside of the needle, and your other hand has the job of pinching your fabric in the position you need it to pinch. So look, I'm threading the needle in through the middle of my little folded sandwich here, and look where the knot ends up. It ends up hiding inside, so no one has to see that big mama knot. It is hiding. The stitch I'm showing you right now is kind of like a spiral stitch, or a whip stitch is what people call it. That means that I will always come in from the back. Maybe I need to push down on the table to get the needle through. I'll always come in from the back, somewhere just a bit in from the edge, and then push the needle up. And look, every time I pull, I'm holding that thread to keep the tail from coming out of the eye. So a whip stitch is really just like making a spiral around the edge of a spiral notebook. And we'll get better on camera here soon. Come in from the back. Push up. Because I'm using fleece, I'm going to use the power of the table to kind of get the tip of the needle through. As I pull, I grab the tail so it doesn't come out of my needle. And then I pull, 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 pull to make a stitch. And look at how it will kind of lay down over the edge and seal off the edge really nice so that we can add stuffing to the pillow. So the idea of stitching is you're trying to make it look good. You have to kind of tell yourself, ooh, I'm gonna make this even and nice. I'm gonna poke the end of the needle right about here, oh no, here, to make the stitches look pretty. It's not gonna happen on its own like a sewing machine. We are hand sewing, and it's actually really beautiful to see nicely hand sewn work. It won't look perfect, and that's the charm. But if you're taking your time, you will see really cute little stitches. And you can mess around with, because this is our sampler, how tight are you going to pull each stitch? Is it going to crimple the edge down, or what's it going to look like? So here I finished with my whip stitch all along one side. And I can see that those stitches lay in a couple different directions, but in general, that's going to stay closed. And that's some good even stitching, even for someone that has done a bunch of stitching. It worked out. So since we tried the whip stitch, I now want to show you the blanket stitch. It's the same. You push the needle up from behind, except, look at this moment. As I'm pulling the thread to make the stitch, I'm going to sneak in the back of the little loop before it closes down. The magic of a blanket stitch is that it really locks the stitch and it helps make each part of the stitch look very straight. So here I am, just like the whip stitch, coming from the back, but I pull until this last moment, and I sneak into that loop before it comes down. And look at how straight each line becomes when we do it that way. We'll do it again from the back, just like whip stitch. I'm pushing down on the table, and then I pull, and then sneak in through the back of that loop and pull it, and look at those straight little lines I get. The other thing I'm getting, if I'll show you here, is a nice straight line down the seam. So I'll show you that in a moment here. Pull. But before it finishes, I lock into that loop. And this is the most sturdy, the most neat of all the stitches you can do for this project. But it's not the easiest one. So that's why we're practicing today. Ooh, there we go. There's that lock. It almost looks like a braid down the seam. So if you've done whip stitch before, the spiral, try blanket stitch for your project this time. If it's too hard, go right on back to whip stitch and do blanket stitch another time when you're ready. I just really like the look, and it's such a secure, solid stitch that will be very unlikely to come undone. I'm going to finish the blanket stitch up this side. And now, before I do the last side, I am going to stuff this. I have some scraps of fleece here, and I will be able to kind of stuff using scraps. And then I'll show you the last stitch we're going to practice today, and that's the running stitch. The running stitch is actually the easiest one that you've probably seen the most in sewing. It just goes over and under, like if a dolphin had a string and was swimming over and under the ocean surface, up and down, up and down. It almost looks like staples because it has every other blank spot and every other stitch. You get to put the point of your needle right where you think it'll look nice and even, push it through. But this one is interesting because you can pull it tight and it'll pucker your fabric, or you can pull it and make it stretched and flat and it'll keep your fabric flat. See how it puckers there? So it's up to you to kind of keep your fabric flat or allow it to pucker.